Hi everybody, welcome to Train Forever. I'm Andrew Barr, and today we're talking about functional training. Specifically, what is it, do you need to do it, or is it a waste of time? This is a fun and surprisingly polarizing topic. On the one hand, you have some coaches saying that everything has to be functional. If it's not functional, don't do it. All isolation exercises are stupid. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have coaches saying that functional training is stupid. It's a complete waste of time. So who's right? Like so many things in training, I think if we can get on the same page about some definitions and actually agree about what functional training is, that most people would more or less be on the same page about the value and utility of functional training. So let's get into it. If we're going to have a discussion about functional training, we need to start by quickly going over some of the history of strength training and weightlifting in North America. Now, strength training has been a part of human civilization since ancient times. But in terms of it being a pop culture phenomenon in North America, that really started in the 50s and 60s with a rise in popularity of bodybuilding. Now, what are some of the core principles of bodybuilding? We're trying to make muscles grow, training is organized around muscle groups, and isolation exercises are emphasized. Because bodybuilding was what was popular, that was what was regarded as the correct way to train. Powerlifting was not popular at this time. Team sport athletes like football players, basketball players, hockey players, they didn't really lift weights, if at all. Correct training was synonymous with bodybuilding. Eventually, weight training caught on amongst athletes, and through the 1970s and 80s, it became much more common and accepted for athletes to lift. The majority of athletes at this time would have still followed bodybuilding style routines, and the results would have been more or less what you would have expected. Athletes would have grown their muscles, they would have got bigger, stronger, and you might have seen some reduction in injury rates. Who knows? It's almost impossible to confirm that. But at the same time, researchers started investigating the relationships between strength training routines and sports performance. And you didn't see very much carryover from these bodybuilding style routines to the main outcome measures relevant to athletic performance that you would be interested in. For example, seated knee extension performance is not very well correlated with vertical jump, and that shouldn't be surprising. If you're finding this video useful and informative, go ahead and give me a like and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another training tip. I'll be putting out a new video each week to help you get the most out of your training sessions. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your support. Once it was established that bodybuilding style training didn't do a very good job of transferring over to athletic performance, it's from here that the idea of sport specificity really took hold. And in this next era, what you started seeing a lot of was coaches trying to design weight room workouts that actually looked like the sport that was being played. We became very obsessed with balance. There was a lot of stuff done on stability balls. The Bosu ball was born in this era, and you saw a lot of work with bands. Some of the things from this era have merits, but others are downright silly. And the fundamental problem was that a lot of coaches were moving away from tried and tested tools like the barbell towards new, innovative tools that maybe didn't do anything at all in the name of functional training. And that's more or less how we got here, where we're not even entirely sure what functional training means, much less if it's a good or a bad thing. And at one end of the spectrum, you have Mike Boyle, who is sometimes credited with having coined the term, who's obviously enjoyed a ton of success with countless world-class athletes across multiple sports, who obviously embraces the idea of functional training. And then you have a coach like Louis Simmons, who's similarly successful, but in the powerlifting realm, who would probably say that functional training is a waste of time. So who's right? Here's a personally relevant anecdote. When I was in school, the instructor for the strength training course was somewhat famous for saying that bicep curls were a waste of time. The argument was you never do elbow flexion in isolation, so it's a non-functional movement and it has no place in your program. Because he was the teacher at a university, a lot of people listened to him, and I'm embarrassed to say that I also listened to that advice and said the same thing for many years. But bicep curls are not a waste of time. Of course they're not. They're a great way to get bigger, stronger biceps. What if that's what you need? What if you need big or strong biceps for something? Bicep curls are a great way to do that. How could we just write off this whole exercise when it has a real, tangible benefit? So let's use this as a jumping off point for answering the question, what is functional training and is it a good or a bad thing? From Wikipedia, good old Wikipedia, functional training is a classification of exercises that involves training the body for the activities of daily life. This is a good starting point, but this definition has some important limitations. For one, whether you call it functional or not, basic strength training fundamentals do a great job for training the body for activities of daily life. Let's use squatting as an example. You need to squat to get up and down off of the toilet, and any half-decent strength training program is going to have squats. You need to know how to deadlift to be able to pick up a heavy grocery bag off the floor, and any half-decent strength training program is going to have a deadlift in it. If the squat and deadlift are movements that help a person be prepared for the activities of daily life, is there a limit to that? A person typically wouldn't need to pick up a bag that weighs more than 50 pounds off the ground. It's certainly not except for in the rarest of circumstances. So is there any value in learning how to deadlift 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 400 pounds? What's the limit? I think you can make the case that building up your max strength to make sub-maximal loads that much less taxing, that has benefit, and we could describe that as functional. But the flip side is that pursuing high levels of strength has a cost on the body too. And there probably is a limit to pursuing elite levels of strength in even functional movements if our objective is to be as functional as possible. The other limitation of the activities of daily living paradigm is that not everybody has the same daily demands. And since very basic training will prepare you for daily life, and a lot of people want to train harder than that, is it really fair to say that pushing things beyond the most basic fundamental lifts is non-functional? I don't think so. There's also so much more that goes into evaluating how appropriate or effective an exercise program is than the exercise selection itself. What about dose? Let's take a movement that probably anybody would agree is pretty darn functional, the lateral squat. Lateral squats are great. It's a great way to get some movement in the frontal plane and to build up strength and resilience in the adductors, muscles of the inner thigh that are so very often underdeveloped. I think we can make the case that just about everybody, as long as there wasn't any pain in the movement, would do well to do some lateral squatting. But an office worker who's training just for fun and to maintain good health, they would probably do just fine by doing some lateral squats in their warm-up and then maybe doing a loaded variation once per week most of the time. Compare that person to a competitive basketball player who needs their adductors to be extremely well developed to withstand the demands of constant lateral movement, done very explosively, needs to avoid the risk of any kind of groin strain. That person would need a lot more lateral squats to appropriately condition their body for their daily demands of living. The point is that it's not just about, this exercise is functional and this exercise is non-functional. There are many different factors that we have to consider when we're evaluating if a program is appropriate or functional for the person we're designing the program for. Let's use the same logic and apply it to our earlier example of the bicep curl. So that same office worker, they would probably have all the bicep strength that they need if they just did rows and chin-ups, movements that are more generally accepted as functional. But what if you're a firefighter and you need really strong arms for your job? What if you're a professional arm wrestler? What if you just want to have really big, strong arms? Even if you think that the bicep curl is a totally non-functional movement, can't the strength developed through the bicep curl be transferred to the other more functional movements? For instance, can't you build up your bicep with curls and then expect to have some level of improvement in your chin-up strength, and then via that chin-up, those chin-up gains, experience more functional benefit? In other words, can't the bicep curl be functional by extension? The point is that you can't just label an exercise functional or non-functional without context. The human body can do thousands of different movements, and it can do them for thousands of different reasons. Black and white labeling of certain exercises as good or bad is generally the wrong way to go about things. There are some exceptions. There are certainly some exercises that are difficult to justify including in any program under any circumstances. See my video about burpees for an example. The definition of functional training that I find helps make sense of all this stuff is anything that transfers. Anything in the weight room that helps you perform in the things that you care about, whatever that might be. I hope you thought today's video was useful, and if you did, please give me a like and make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another training tip. I'll be putting out a new video each week to help you get the most out of your training sessions. If you head to the description, you can get my free guide to building core strength, and you can find my 2 12-week training programs made specifically for beginners, one to be done at home and one that can be done in the gym. You can also find information about my online coaching too. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.